Hello, everyone. Welcome to the 12th RFF CMCC Navigate webinar entitled International Aviation and Shipping in a World Below 2 Degrees. Moderated by myself, Eduardo Müller Casseres from COPPE in Rio, Brazil, and presented by Olivier Dessens from UCL, London, UK. This webinar is part of the Navigate project, which started in 2019. The aim of this project is to further develop the modeling tools known as Integrated Assessment Models, IAMs, with three levers: systems, people, and usability and outreach. Specifically today, we are in the context of task 3.3, which aims at improving the modeling of international transport, aviation and shipping in IAMs, and also investigating the role of aviation and shipping in deep decarbonization scenarios. Your audio and video will be deactivated in this webinar, and if you have to ask questions, please use the Q&A section, preferably. Finally, it is worth noting that this webinar will be recorded and uploaded on the CMCC YouTube channel. And that's it. Our speaker today is Dr. Olivier Dessens. He works at the UCL Energy Institute as a modeler in energy systems and IAMs. Furthermore, both his doctoral and postdoctoral research focused on climate and atmospheric composition modeling. Olivier, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you. Can you stop sharing? And yeah, I will share my screen. My name is Olivier Dessens, and I'm from University College London. As part of Navigate, I'm presenting this seminar on international transport in a world of below 2 degrees. I will start the presentation with some reminder of how the sectors we are looking at, so international shipping and international aviation. What are the level of emission, the impact on climate, some sort of let's say a future scenario for these two sectors, and then I will get to some results that we got from using our models within the Navigate project, and looking at the impact of the impact of a world below 2 degrees on the two sectors. And from the model we've got in Navigate, we've got 6 different models involved in this study, and they are from a different institution, and so this presentation will finish with contribution from COPPE, CIRED, PBL, E3M, PIC, and CMCC as well, and results from their model. So that's the overview of the presentation. As I said, I will just remind you quickly what is below the 2 degree targets and the Paris Agreement. What are the at the moment share of the international transport emissions and climate impact, but also looking at some specific and similarities and difference between these two modes. We'll quickly look at how these two modes can mitigate their climate impact and their emissions. And then we'll look at the representation of these two sectors in the integrated assessment model of Navigate, and the first step of the analyzing the level of decarbonization potential by these two sectors in a different scenario below 2 degrees target. So just a quick reminder, so there has been the Paris Agreement with the temperature goal, so limiting the increase well below 2 degrees and limit to pursuing the effort to 1.5 degrees global temperature change. And also there is not only a temperature goal, but also an emissions goal, so with peaking as soon as possible and then to achieve climate neutrality. And then obviously this is let's say supported by the NDCs, so the NDCs that give information on domestic measure to achieve greenhouse gas emission reduction, and those NDCs are regularly increase. So there is an increase in ambitions every 5 years to achieve the 1.5 degrees. So that's one of the graphs of the IPCC 1.5 degree scenarios, and depending on how much you rely on negative removal of carbon in the second part of the century, you have different shape of emissions pathways. However, you can see that in most of them, it shows a quite strong global reduction in emissions over the next 20 to 30 years. So that was just to remind you the context of below 2 degrees and toward 1.5 degrees scenario. So international transport, here we are talking about the two international transport, international aviation and international shipping. And maybe sometimes during the presentation, I will just say shipping and aviation, forgetting to include international in front, but we are always talking about international transport in this presentation. So there's two sectors, and two international sectors are kept out of the main frame of the Paris Agreement because they are not national emissions, and as such they are regulated by two different international organization, which are the International Maritime Organization for shipping and the International Civil Aviation Organization for aviation, so IMO and ICAO. If we look at present-day emissions of international shipping and aviation, so I'm taking, let's say, the 2019 emissions. So that in terms of carbon dioxide, shipping were 692 million tons, and aviation 618 million tons in 2019. Obviously, 2020 was a very specific, and 2021 were a very specific years in terms of international transport. And shipping, so for 2020, so a reduction from 2019 of emissions by 10%, and international aviation by more than half for 2020 compared to 2019. But if you look at how much they represent in terms of global greenhouse gas emissions, you've got there's emissions here, and both of the two international sectors represent less than 2% each of the global emissions. So they are a small part of the global emissions. However, they have shown a large increase in the last 2 decades. For example, shipping has increased by 40% and aviation by 75% in terms of emissions from 2000. Also, something that is quite similar in the two sectors is the vessels, planes, and ships got a quite a long lifespan of between 25 to 30 years. And recently, the fleet age is about 10 years for aviation and 15 years for shipping. So that means that a lot of present day planes and ships will still be flying, let's say, in 20 years. Still, the presentation of the situation of these two sectors. So here we had some quite similarities in terms of level of emissions, in terms of fleet age and vessel lifetime. Here are some difference, and for example, mostly in terms of international transport, shipping is represented by almost only freight transport, when aviation 80% of the transport is for passenger and only 20% for freight. So that's quite a big difference in let's say behavior of the two sectors. Also, in terms of climate impact, at the moment, if they've got quite similar levels of CO2 emissions, the impact of the two sectors on the climate are slightly different in terms of non-CO2 emissions. And let's say shipping's one big part of the non-CO2 impact come from black carbon emissions, which represent probably at the moment 20-21% of the CO2 impact. However, this is part of the fact that shipping is using fossil fuel. And if you decarbonize shipping fuel to remove CO2 emissions, you will also remove the black carbon emissions who are linked to the carbon in the fuel. However, aviation is different due to the fact that emissions are at altitude, at flight altitude, and they are composed of aerosol, water vapor, and NOx emissions. And at altitude, there's non-CO2 emissions will have an impact on climate. And if you take into consideration these emissions as well as the CO2 emissions of the current fleet, the latest analysis say that they probably represent, the non-CO2 emission probably represent 2/3 of the net effect of aviation on climate. And the emissions, not all will be removed by decarbonizing, for example, your fuel. If you're decarbonizing your fuel, for example, using hydrogen or as an aviation fuel, sorry. For example, water emissions and NOx emission will still take part and will still have a climate impact even if you decarbonize your fuel. Finally, so these two sectors are taken into care by these two organizations, IMO and ICAO. And so these two international organizations have started to draw some climate policy in terms of regulating the emissions of their sector. So ICAO has, I think in 2016 or 18, has developed the CORSIA, which is a policy that means carbon offsetting and reduction system for international aviation. And so as it's in the title. It's a reduction scheme in emissions that can rely on reduction of emissions, but also on carbon offsetting, so removing carbon from the atmosphere and taking this offsetting to get to lowering this international aviation emissions. And the goal is to have a carbon neutral growth from 2019 in the aviation. At the moment, CORSIA is on a voluntary scheme until 2024, I think, and it's mostly reporting and accounting emissions for the aviation sector. And also they are also defining the specific sustainable aviation fuel that can be taken into account in the reduction scheme of emissions, CO2 emissions from aviation. So on the shipping side, the IMO has started in 2011 with EEDI, which is an energy efficiency design index for new ships. So that means that they were imposing a specific efficiency improvement on new build ships, and that was accompanied with SEEMP, which is a Ship Energy Efficiency Management Plan. So getting the new ship being more efficient. And IMO in 2019 created or produced the IMO greenhouse gas strategy, with, once again, like for CORSIA, at the moment it's in reporting and accounting mode to check emissions from international shipping, but the target that has been developed by the IMO greenhouse gas strategy is a target of 50% reduction of CO2 emissions in 2050 compared to 2008 emissions. So there are the two international policy mechanisms that will affect the international transport in shipping and aviation. So obviously now we've got the situation of present day with emissions and also policies that are applied on the two different sectors. So the next step is looking at the future and obviously it starts with projecting demand for these two sectors. Obviously, many factors are impacting demand projection for international shipping and aviation. Obviously, the socioeconomic development of the world, but also behavioral change in passenger for aviations, and also policies that are applied. So policies from these two international organization, for example. But if we looked at SSP2 projection, and here the top graph is shipping demand from the IMO, and the lower graph is aviation demand from in-house UCL aviation model. You can see that depending on the scenario, if we looked at shipping, all the scenarios present an increase in demand between 2018 and 2050, sorry. If in the base case, the increase can be 90%. If you go to a scenario that got a 1.5 degrees target demand, which is a lower one with a different color, shows an increase by 56% compared to 2018. And if we look again, the same in aviation demand, and here we've got passenger and freight demand separated. And if you look at the increase between 2018 and 2050, if you were in a high demand scenario for passenger, the increase can be for 375% compared to 2018. And if you allow a decoupling between socioeconomic development and aviation demand, even with this decoupling from the socioeconomic development, you've got an increase that can represent 100% of 2018 in 2050 for passenger demand. And you can see the same on the freight demand for this scenario. So the projection of demand are always an increase in demand in the international transport for shipping and aviation. So how to get this demand and also get the reduction in emissions that can be that can achieve below 2 degrees and 1.5 degrees. So for that, I'm starting to look at what are the policies and mitigation technologies that are available in the two sectors. And in shipping, well, obviously operational measure and logistic, such as slow steaming, can help to reduce emissions. However, a lot of reduction in emission will go from the use of low carbon fuel that can be a change in the carbon content of the fuel, so for example LNG, but also using bioenergy or synthetic fuel. Demand reduction is more difficult to achieve, and it will be driven by regionalization of industrial production, for example, or development of the circular economy. For aviation, I mean, we've got the same three different levers. So efficiency, operational and infrastructure efficiency. But again, that has a limited effect because of the increase in demand, which is usually higher than the gain in efficiencies. So new technology are needed to eliminate emissions at the source. Again, it's using fuel with lower carbon contents, or using new technology for aviation, such as electric or hydrogen plane. Finally, aviation is always also, at least the industry is always talking about offsetting using carbon capture. Demand reduction policies will go through reduction demand mostly in passenger, and could be driven by a carbon tax, but also frequent flyer levy can be applied to reduce the number of frequent flyer, or also same can be an escalating carbon tax. So that's different levels you can have to achieve mitigation of emissions in the two sectors. If you look at what is looking at the industry, for example, for aviation, IATA, which is the aviation industry representative, have created a net zero strategy where they want to go to net zero for aviation in 2050, and it's the view of how to achieve that. And you can see that a big chunk, 65% of the reduction, come from the use of sustainable aviation fuel, mostly bio and synthetic fuel. 13% come from a new technology, electric and hydrogen plane. In 2050, they are still showing a relatively small impact because of the development of this new technology and the limitation of for example, battery energy density. Finally, they see a small role for infrastructure and operational efficiency, but you can see that it's only 3% in effect. And finally, they looked at offset via carbon capture, which still represent in 2050 around 20% of their strategy. So that was to show how the one of the industries sees how to get to net zero for one sector. So now I will quickly get to what has been represented in Navigate, in the 6 IAMs we've got in Navigate. So the 6 IAMs are presented here. And in the presentation, at the last slide, you will have to which university or research center there's models are linked to. So here are the list of the 6 models, and quickly these models are at global representation with different regional split, obviously, and with different way of representing the energy system and more precisely the international transport sectors. For example, if we looked at what kind of fuels are represented in the 2 sectors, you can see that if we look at aviation fuel, all the models got conventional bio and synthetic kerosene. However, hydrogen and electric aircraft are not in all the models. And in a way, for shipping, it's a little bit of the same situation. Conventional, bio and synthetic, and also LNG are mostly represented in all models. However, hydrogen, ammonia, or electric are represented in a limited number of models. And also the representation of the efficiency of these sectors, technological efficiencies and logistical efficiencies of the sector in the models are represented differently. So we've got a bunch of 6 models with quite different representation of the 2 sectors. So the idea is to do a model intercomparison to investigate how these 2 international transport sector behave under the 1.5 below 2 and 1.5 degrees target, and how they structurally change in their representation. And also how they can help to achieve the targets, the global targets of the Paris Agreement. So we get two different types of scenarios, one set for aviation and one set for shipping. But globally we'll use SSP2 assumption and global carbon budget for the scenarios. If we looked quickly at the aviation scenarios, obviously we start with an NDC scenario, and then we looked at different 1.5 degrees targets with a carbon budget of 700 gigatons of CO2, and with a different level of aviation demand. So aviation demand is fixed in this scenarios to high, normal, and low aviation demand. And also we've got specific scenarios with higher sustainable aviation fuel. And here are the emissions of CO2 from the international aviation sector. So just to remind you, it's a global carbon budget. There is no specific carbon budget for the sector or specific policies for the industry. And if we looked at on the right, it's the CO2 emissions from the aviation sector, international aviation sector, in the different model. And you can see that in this case, almost all models are above the CORSIA levels, who are limiting or zero carbon emissions for growth above 2018. And how the model are reacting to this global carbon budget. So here we've got the fuel mix in 2050 and 2070 for the different scenario and for the different model. And mostly you can see that here there are quite difference between the model in terms of fuel use and fuel switch. However, you can see that fossil fuel kerosene are still a large part of the energy carrier for aviation in 2050 and 2070 in these scenarios. And most of the model goes to include, let's say, biokerosene to a certain level in 2050 and 2070. But let's say some models who got more constraints in biomass availabilities in 2070 start to go to synthetic fuel, so power to fuel kerosene. If we looked at maritime analysis, and that's made by my colleagues Eduardo at COPPE. So again, we've got a global carbon budget, and we don't have a specific target for the sector or policy for the sector. And here, carbon budgets are two different carbon budgets. One that is, let's say, in line with a 2-degree scenario, and one to 600 gigaton, who is in line to a 1.5 degree scenario. And here are the CO2, the change in CO2 emissions in the different model for 3 scenarios. So the reference INDC, and then the 1006, also 2 degrees and 1.5 degree scenario. and that's for 2030, 2050, and 2070. And you can see that in 2050, some models are achieving a reduction that is on the range of the IMO target 2018 for the 1.5 degrees, but for the 2 degrees, some models are still above 2018 emissions, and in this case it's Tian and Which. And when we go to 2070, almost all models are getting to the IMO level of reducing emissions by 50%. Okay, and if we looked at now what are the energy carriers in 2030, 2050, and 2070, so the middle one in 2050, and you can see that in the different scenario, you've got still conventional fossil fuel driven scenario shipping fuel even in 2070, and again all some models are going to biofuels, and other models switch to, such as Tian, switch to ammonia in this case, so synthetic fuel in 2070 mostly. And a limited impact in 2050. So a quick concluding remarks of international transport and then the below 2 degrees target. So in recent decades, there's two sectors have seen quite large increase in emissions. And also they seems to show a large or still an increase in demand within the next 30 to 40 years, and also they are quite important to support development and way of life in terms of international movements of goods and communities. If we looked at the two sectors within a global carbon budget, we can see from the results of the models in Navigate that there is, without specific sectoral policy, there is still quite residual emissions in the two sectors due to the fact that they are still using fossil fuel energy carrier. And in some case, you can say that that residual emission can be compensated with CDR technology, so carbon removal technologies within the model. If we looked at what has been analyzed in sectoral net zero targets, for example, for the ICAO, but also some for shipping, non-fuel-based solutions such as demand management or operational efficiencies are important, but will not achieve the net zero alone. So in this case, the industry sees a fuel switch to non-carbon based fuel, and also in some case for aviation offsetting the remaining emissions. Whatever the target, if it's just a global carbon budget or a sectoral net zero target, this will require a comprehensive strategy involving policy decision at the international level, but also at industry level, technology choice, and quite a large infrastructure development, particularly for the implementation of the non-carbon fuel and the new technologies such as electric or hydrogen. And that needs to start very soon and with a large impetus within the next 3 decades up to 2050. And just to finish my presentation, then here you've got the model and institutional belongings, and finally the reference that has been used during the presentation. I will stop here and give now the floor to Eduardo. And if you don't mind, I will stop sharing.
Okay, thank you, Olivier, for this nice presentation. It's a good overview of both sectors. It's 3:44 now. We have the time for some questions, and actually we already have some written questions here for you. The first one is from Valérie Benes. She says, the presentation mentions that freight represents 100% of shipping, but only 20% of aviation. Does this not take into consideration personnel transport, such as intercountry ferries, for example, North Sea and Baltic Sea?
So I've seen almost 100%. Yes, the ferries, but it's a relatively small part of international shipping, and it's not. I mean, it was just to show that I don't have the percentage exactly, but most of the demand, because ferries are also transporting a lot of international road transport. So it's a lot of per tons. It's a lot of freight compared to aviation.
Yeah, I think the main point was to stress that it's very different from aviation in this sense, and the bulk of international shipping is really related to cargo.
Yeah.
So the next one is from Gianandrea Manarini. I wonder why e-methanol is missing in your IAM as a fuel for shipping. E-methanol proved to have high technological maturity and was recently chosen for a big order of new builds by a major container shipping company.
Yes, I mean, I would say it's biomethanol missing from our representation. Because
I think maybe I can help you with that one. Actually, e-methanol is included in the analysis, but it's not present in all the models. We have for the shipping paper specifically, we have I think 6 models, and some of them have certain fuels and others don't.
Yeah.
What we did actually, and maybe this is the cause of the confusion here, because fuel production routes are very diverse, and the possible final carriers are also really diverse. So we had to create groups of fuels, and e-methanol, for example, is included in the AG other, I think, label.
Yeah.
So it's inside, but as a technological option, not necessarily it is chosen by the models, but it is there. Please, Olivier. Sorry, I think I
mean, because we represent it in our model, so that's why I was surprised that it's not. I mean, but it's how we group the how can I say the different fuels technologies and
but maybe it's really useful to stress that even if some of our models have all or nearly all technological options, they not necessarily and frequently they do not choose all these options. But let me continue here because there are still a couple of questions. The next one is from Hélène von Soest. Why the different carbon budgets for aviation and shipping, and why not 400 gigatons for a 67% chance at 1.5 degrees? I think that's a really good question, and let's hear.
I mean,
first.
yeah, it was. I mean, first we decided to have two different, let's say, scenarios for aviation and shipping, because we were. I mean, it was too difficult to get let's say, the comparison of the two sectors in one single analysis. So that's why we decided to split the two sectors in two different, let's say, protocols, and it's probably where it started to diverge. And so the protocol for aviation choose only one single carbon budget, global carbon budget, and we choose one quite how can I say, quite large, to be able to get most of the model that are in Navigate, be able to solve, let's say, and to achieve this carbon budget. And the shipping sector went for two different carbon budget, one a little bit lower than the one in aviation, and one higher, so going to 2 degrees and 1.5 degrees. However, I think that in this case, some models had some trouble to achieve the second scenario. So that's completely different. We decided to different protocol for the two different analyses, which I completely agree, it doesn't help when you want to present the results at once. Also, what differs between the two protocols is that in the case of aviation, the demand has been pre-calculated and is exogenous to the model. So you've got a certain RPK demand that is in the protocol, and so the model will be able to react with efficiency and fuel switch, for example, instead of the choice of the protocol for shipping is more driven by the international situation, socioeconomic international trade situation, and depends also quite a lot on the decarbonization of the energy system. So you will have a change in demand, which is driven by the change in fossil fuel transport, for example. Under 1.5 degrees, fossil fuel transport will go down. So there will be a change in the demand in shipping that you won't see in aviation. So that's why in shipping, the demand wasn't fixed to a certain level, but was taken by each model to react to the global situation of the model.
Yeah, maybe just to add on the shipping side, replying to Hélène, we work with two budgets, and looking at the latest IPCC report, we have a 1,000 budget, which would be compatible with well below 2, approximately, and the 600 budget would be approximately compatible with 1.5 with overshoot or slightly above. And one of the reasons we didn't have a 400 budget is that yes, it would be the best option for 1.5 with high probability, but some of our, as we know, the 1.5 target is increasingly difficult and with stable emissions, and some of our models would not be able to get there. So the intercomparison would be more difficult. So we tried to choose the lowest budget that would allow for the comparison, but we can infer from that maybe that yes, the results are maybe indicating what would be compatible with well below 2, but for 1.5, it's true that more ambition would be required than what we see currently in the results. Next question is from, actually, it's just a comment from Carla Schulte-Fischedik. She's suggesting a website for related to aviation, so staygrounded.org. I think I'll just go to next question. It's Helen again. What actions, investments, policy decisions are needed already in this decade, in your view?
Well, I mean, I don't have the numbers in terms of how what investments are needed to change the what's the level of investment to change the technology and the fleet, but yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, so I'll keep going. Next one is from Dave Dees. Without overstating what the ICAO and CORSIA are achieving, can you distinguish the IMO progress? To date, it looks to me that IMO standards have only tracked what the industry is already doing, and that the overall IMO process has not achieved anything leading to significant GHG emission reductions.
It's a usual critique of the IMO or the IMO policies, and indeed the efficiency improvements, or the EEDI, were just, let's say, using the improvement that have been expected or seen in the industry, let's say some decades ago. So in terms of this policy, it was not really challenging, I think. I mean, yes, yeah, IMO is for the 2050 target. I think yes, the IMO is following the what the industry expects to do. Yes, saying that, you could almost say the same for the ICAO CORSIA, because if you listen or read what the industry is planning to do, for example, a lot of airlines are planning to introduce larger amounts of SAF in 2030, up to 10% in their fuel. So also the industry has targets to mitigate their emissions.
Thank you. The next is from Sonia Ye. What surprised you the most? Unexpected findings from this modeling comparison exercise?
I mean, what surprised me, it's in a way, it shows really that in our model as well. We always say that there's two sectors that are hard to decarbonize, and then the model agree with that. If you don't have a target, a sectoral target on the model. Really, the model are trying to delay the decarbonization as much as they can, and it seems that it's in something that you can see in all the models. After that, I was surprised how in terms of two models. So our model is for example for shipping is going strongly to use ammonia, which is let's say something that has been found by some sectoral analysis at UCL, for example, and it's how the IMO force greenhouse gas seen also mitigation, but not in all the model in terms of using ammonia in shipping. And in terms of aviation, most of the models go for biofuels. However, two models, TIAM and which TIAM goes to synthetic fuel in 2070, for example, because of a limited amount of biomass available. And I think which is mostly using biomass to carbon capture, CDR. So it seems that this model is continuing to use fossil fuel kerosene in aviation for a longer time.
Yeah, we have so many questions and only 2 minutes, but I'll keep going for now. Gianluca Pelecchia is asking, which is the perspective for inland shipping in terms of alternative fuels or technologies? And yeah, maybe I could also help with that one.
Well, I think now for inland shipping and sorry, my laptop is complaining. Oh. For inland shipping, I think, and also island, so short traject or short trip battery ferries and stuff like that are envisaged. But yeah, I mean,
yeah. I mean, before answering, I'll just add that maybe we can take 2 or 3 minutes to try to get a few more questions, but
yeah.
We go until 3 or 4. Yeah, I would say that in terms of shipping for fuels for inland shipping, this will not be very different, but something to keep in mind is that the lower the hull of shipping, more you can use lower energy density carriers. So when we look at inland shipping, maybe hydrogen or ammonia would be more suited than to very long distance shipping, for example, in the oil market or in the iron ore market. The next question is from Franco Boscolo. Can shipping ever return to what it was before COVID, or is shipping subject to cyclicality? Thanks.
I mean, that for the demand in transport for shipping, it was including the COVID impact, and it goes back to 2018, 2019 demand, and goes the demand increase obviously depending of the scenario you're choosing, but even I think for a 1.5 degree scenario, demand in transport for international shipping increased by 50-60%, and up to 100% in 2050 compared to 2018 if there is no let's say constraint on the demand. So yes, I mean it will bounce back to what it was before, and increase in the demand will increase, yes, in terms of shipping.
Great. Now from Sebastiano Cristoforetti, were docking/import emissions considered within the scenarios? In that case, which growth curve did you use for cold ironing gradually coming into the game? Yeah, that's focused on shipping.
Yeah. Yeah.
I could also
if you want. Yeah.
Comment. Yeah. That varies according to models. There are models that specifically take into account some mitigation measures, such as cold ironing, and that's certainly relevant for the electricity use. But in general, most models apply efficiency factors which are not related to a specific measures, but to a combined potential of these measures. So, for example, coffee, which is the model I know the best, does not specifically see cold ironing entering the game, but we take the reduction in electricity demand into account in the long term. Gianluca Pelecchia, are all the models presented today simulation models?
No, I mean, some are simulation models, some are optimization. So, for example, TIAM is an optimization model. I think coffee is a simulation model.
It's also optimization, actually.
Optimization.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, so we have some of them are also simulation and work with carbon price, for example.
Yeah.
So it's already almost 4:05. Sorry, I think we have to close the seminar now. Most of the questions were answered, but feel free also to get in touch if you have more specific questions of you want to discuss with Olivier, with me, or other colleagues in the project. Thank you for your presence and participation.